Thank you for that song. Thank you for not playing the overplayed Frozen songs, but for rather finding something that will be just right for us. Like Sarah said, my name is Dr. MaryRuth Hackett, and I'm going to be here with you all afternoon. Sarah and I are going to trade off back and forth a little bit, so you don't get too tired of one of our voices. But thank you for your introduction, and thank you for inviting me to come speak with you all today. I'm going to be talking about predominantly identity development, and specifically your identity as daughters of God. And hopefully, throughout the afternoon, I'll help you to recognize some of the challenges that can keep us from really embracing that role as God's beloved daughter. My PhD is in educational psychology and lifespan human development. My area of primary interest is identity development, not just with younger kids, but also throughout the entire lifespan. I've got a sprinkling of cognitive psychology in my background with both infant cognition and adult aging, way on the other end of the spectrum. But I stepped back from research and from teaching at the college level to raise my 4 kiddos. So that's my youngest there a few years ago. My kids are range in age from 10, they keep changing, 10 to 19. So I've got a grade schooler, a middle school / junior high kiddo, one in high school and one in college now. I've been talking to parents for a few years now specifically, and I've got a parenting podcast as well with the Diocese of Phoenix. But really, I love talking to women, quite honestly. This talk this evening with the kids will be a lot harder for me than talking to adults. I went to a women's college, and my heart is just there with all you women and the way that we uniquely contribute to society in such a beautiful way. So as I mentioned, today we're going to be talking about identity development for women and individual, and specifically how your concept of who you are is fully realized and fulfilled through that relationship with God. The primary embodiment of who I am and who each of you are lies relationally in that relationship with the Lord. The role of daughter is the only role that doesn't change throughout your life. It's not dependent on your lives, the love of others, the acceptance of others. It's not contingent upon your success or your hard work. It can't be earned at all. It also can't be lost. To live as a daughter means to continue to live in a uniquely positioned relationship with God the Father, trusting in Him to do 3 things: to provide, to protect, and to teach or instruct or sometimes discipline. Put all those 3 together. So our identity and our purpose can't ever be found in our vocation or in our station of life, only through the relationship that we have with God the Father. Our identities as daughters is discovered and realized daily, and it's done so in the particular opportunities that you have to serve God in your own specific way. Our purpose is found in how we live our lives as daughters of God, regardless of any circumstances. Because there's no expectation from God that we be the perfect daughter. We are always going to be His imperfect daughter. We're not going to be loved as a function of how well we live that. We're not going to be loved as any function of how well we succeed at any particular task. I forgot my iPad. It's at the other site. I plugged it in. I left it. I was like, I'll just top off the charge really quick. It was at 96%. That tells you what kind of person I am, right? 96%. Let's just top off that iPad, right? No. So I'm using the backup notes, right? God doesn't care. He's going to do what He's going to do, whether I succeed in remembering my iPad or not, right? We are loved for who we are and who we're going to become, both. We're molded and formed through our relationship with His Father. And he allows us to grow daily through those struggles and through our interactions with others. That's where our growth occurs. It grows through our vocation. But holiness is not found in our vocation. Holiness is found in our relationship with the Lord. So as a daughter, we can find peace and we can find fulfillment that eludes us otherwise through those human relationships, which are not generally always peaceful. Too often we seek our worth, though, through those personal relationships. We want to be a better wife. We want to be a better teacher. We want to be a better mom. But human relationships alone will never sustain us. They will never fulfill us. Even the most permanent of those relationships will change throughout our life. My children are growing now. One of them is leaving the home. Well, he left the home already for college. Okay? And so I'm seeing that my role with him as mom is starting to fade a little bit, as it should. Okay? One day, far in the future, I know I will probably, statistically, I think I will probably leave the role of wife and become widow. That's just what happens, right? And hopefully one day I'll add grandmother, to my role, to my title. Again, in the far future, though, for that one as well. Not ready for that yet, for sure. But our primary identity, since we were created, has always been as God's daughter. And that's that one relationship that's not going to fade as long as we keep showing up and remain faithful to Him. We've got to enter into relationships with others, joyfully, striving to build love in those daily interactions. That is still really important, and I don't want to downplay that. It's through those daily interactions that we grow. We're going to talk a lot in the second section about growing through those struggles. But our worth is found in that relationship with God. In 1 John 3:2, we read, "Beloved, we are God's children now. What we shall be has not yet been revealed." And I love that. He goes on, but I just love that. It will be revealed. Accepting your role as the daughter of the Father means recognizing your unique gifts so that you may use those for God's glory. It means living intentionally in community with others that He has placed in your life. It means growing through your struggles and letting each challenge draw you closer to Him as He strengthens you. And it means picking up that cross and uniting your life to His through your prayer with that cross. First, you've got to develop a self-awareness, though, of what your own gifts are, what your own strengths are, what your own weaknesses are even. And you've got to understand how you use those gifts with confidence, releasing expectations of perfection, and striving towards holiness. And then secondly, we'll talk in the second session about learning to grow through your challenges as a way of growing in holiness. We all have individual crosses to bear, and it is easy to fall into despair, especially when we compare our life to others. But it's in those challenges that we have the greatest opportunity to grow. And it's in those daily frustrations, those daily struggles, that we're presented with a continual opportunity to do God's will in that moment. That's when it's hard. That's when we really know. Peace is not going to come from any of the circumstances. It comes from above and is cultivated within. Even in the most peaceful situations, it's easy to feel angst or anxiety if you lack trust in the Lord. And trust is slowly cultivated through prayer. Okay? You can't just trust someone that you don't know. And then we're going to close later today talking about how we can have deeper intimacy with the Lord and how we can have those regular conversations, how we can continue to show up to really grow in depth with Him. He's there for us even in our busy moments, but we don't always seek him. There's so much noise in our lives. So we're going to start with that first part with identity. Then we're going to take a break. I'll come back. We'll talk about struggles. The crosses we break, we'll break for tacos, because it's always awesome to have tacos. I'm from Arizona. When she said tacos, I was like, yes. And then we'll wrap up with a really practical session on building that relationship with the Lord from wherever we are. You guys have some handouts. They look a little bit like this. This is the schedule, and then there's another one that has similar graphics on it. That's for you to take with you. We are not going to have time to dive into those questions. That's your take-home gift from me to take to prayer. Work through those. You've got a journal to write in, because you're going to need a lot more space than I left you. If you want to jot down things, that's fine. If this was a full day retreat, we would build some time in for that, mass, adoration, all that stuff, but half days, so you got to do that work on your own. That's your homework. Okay, so identity. I just love identity. See what the love the Father has bestowed on us, that we may be called the children of God. We are, as I said before, created to be in relationship with him. We are created to love and be loved. The purpose of our creation is tied deeply to who we are as his daughters. As St. John points out, the Father bestowed love on us relationally as his children. We are his, and if we fail to accept that role as primary, you're going to continue to struggle throughout your life. You're going to continue to fail to understand who you really are, because you are created to love the Father, to be loved by him. And everything you do, every other role that you occupy, should be informed and fed through that love, that primary. So what does it mean to be a daughter? Well, that role has changed for all of us as we move from childhood into adulthood. At one time, being a daughter meant complete dependence on our parents. Now as an adult, it might mean serving them in some way and helping tend to their needs. And so as our role changes with our earthly parents, though, we always remain that daughter who has a father to guide her, to protect her, to provide for her. And we can't have a relationship with someone from whom we're estranged. As daughters, we've got to seek to remain in constant relationship with that Lord. That's how we come to understand that role. And there are times when we're going to be turning to him for aid, where we're going to struggle with our disappointments with him, with his response. And there are going to be times when we recognize that we've got to give of ourselves in order to help them out of love for him. Okay, because we don't always serve those around us with love just because we love them. Sometimes we've got to dig a little deeper with a little more love, and that's the love of the Father. And so all the while we're serving those around us, if we're doing it from a place of love that comes from love for our Father, then that helps us to remain in relationship with him. It helps us to remain open to his guidance and to his protection and to his very presence. But the day-to-day grind, man, that can make it hard to stay connected to him. It is so easy to get distracted by everything else out there. We've got to live with intentionality in what we do and what we surround ourselves with. And part of that is really embracing our own uniqueness, not listening to the noise outside, but really turning inward to understand our own gifts, our own strengths, so that we can use them effectively. Our very capacity to love others in our midst is rooted, Sarah did a great job in describing the love languages and how we communicate that. That's a great first step. It's rooted in our ability to recognize how we give and receive love. Now, when I was doing this exercise with my kids a few years ago, they went through and they were pretty good at recognizing their own, but no one could recognize what mine were, because they all thought that I was whatever their gift was. So my acts of service kids, oh, it's this, you love it when I, And so often as women, we don't recognize what our own are because we're so busy communicating to others around us with their languages. But then that keeps us from being able to really receive and give in the way that is meaningful for us. Sometimes we can recognize in ourselves some certain gift or talent or strength, but we don't use it, we hold back because we think we're not holy enough. And this is a really big trap. We doubt ourselves, we doubt our capabilities, we doubt our adequacy, and sometimes we need a little prompting from the Lord. We've got to get prompting from others sometimes to look back and say, the Lord is prompting you to do this. And especially if you're a words of affirmation person, that prompting is really, really, really powerful. But I want you to think for a minute, when was the last time you thought about your own likes or dislikes or strengths or weaknesses? I mean, beyond the I didn't really like that sandwich the other day. I mean, really thinking about it. Too often in childhood, we explore roles that psychologists call impossible selves, where we think, okay, I'm gonna be like this right now, and then teens will try on that attitude, that dress, it doesn't really fit. I'm gonna be more like this right now, and so it's normal in identity development to go through these times where we explore possible selves, and then we maybe find something that fits, and then that kind of fades in the background when we become just more serving of others. But it's more than just how you dress or whether you're introverted or extroverted, right? Who we are has to do a great deal with what sort of virtues God has given us to exercise in this world. So are you someone who's patient? Do you have an ability to really empathize with others? Do you have a deep understanding? Do you have courage or fortitude? So when you get to a point where you're jotting down that in those reflection questions, think specifically about the virtues. Is there something that you were endowed at baptism and strengthened through confirmation that maybe you've sort of forgotten about, that God has given you specifically to do in this world, a gift to use in this world? When we talk about someone's purpose in this world, there's a lot what was I created to do or be? It's easy to get caught up on these monumental things I'm going to be an author, I'm going to be a mom, I'm going to be a psychologist. But that's not really what we're talking about when we talk about striving to find our purpose. Our purpose is found in the everyday interactions with people around us. That's where our purpose is found, right? Because we are created to love and to be loved, and we do that in community and relationship with one another. Our purpose is fulfilled in that help that we offer to a friend in need, or that support we give to a sibling. It's the unique way that you, as an individual, spread God's love to others. I think one of the reasons why people suffer at my age from those midlife crises is because they've lost their bearing on who they are, because they've spent so much time serving others without thinking about how they uniquely are filling their purpose by serving others. Women can be really self-sacrificing and adaptive, right? And we put everybody's wants and needs above our own, and that can be great. When no one else liked country music in my house, I just stopped listening to it. It was just easier than getting the eye rolls and things like that. No one else likes scary movies. No one at all likes scary movies in our household, but my husband did, and so he just kind of stopped watching them when we got married. And again, that was okay. But it's good to look at some of those surface level things and say, okay, what do I really enjoy? But also to look deeper into beyond that surface. Sarah has on your handout the Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And God wasn't necessarily talking about whether or not you were going to like scary movies when you got older or not, right? The much bigger questions to this who am I, what is my purpose in the world, what is special about me, those we're going to continue to ask ourselves throughout our life. And they're found in the fact that, who am I? Well, you were created in the likeness and image of God. What was I created to do? You were created to do His will. His will. In the individual everyday moments. And so that knowledge should be the foundation for your days. And then you work to prayerfully discern His will in that moment, every day. Keeping in mind that your service day to day is your way of fulfilling God's will in this world. Keeping those unique gifts that you've received, that patience or that compassion, at the forefront, knowing like this is what I've been prepared for, Lord. This is what you created me for. Now, one obstacle to purposeful, meaningful action in our lives. Oh, you have pretty pictures up there. Sorry, I mean it's kind of nice actually. The purposeful, meaningful action. One thing that keeps us from that can be our inability to recognize our real gifts or talents. Sometimes it's easier to recognize those things in others, and then to not really have a deep understanding of ourselves, because sometimes we look and we see, well, they can do it better. So that means that maybe I'm not as good at that as I thought I was. But each time we use them, we strengthen them. And so not using a gift that you know you have, but you're maybe a little shy about using, that doesn't help you to grow that gift. You grow it by using it. Sometimes we can recognize our gifts, but we don't value them. Quite honestly, it's just, you don't want that gift. You kind of say, can I take that back and exchange it for something else? I kind of wanted to be smarter. I didn't want to be, this, I want to be that. So valuing our gifts is different than recognizing our gifts. We can say, sure, I'm gifted with musical skills or with writing, but I don't really value that, so I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to share it with others. I might use it privately, but I'm not going to share it with others. And that can be sometimes because it wasn't valued when we were growing up. Or maybe it's a part of us that we're just discovering and we haven't fully embraced. And that's the difference between self-concept, that's what I'm talking about, an understanding of the self, and self-esteem. Self-esteem is I like the gifts that I have, okay? Not just that I know what I have. I can have a healthy self-concept and understand my gifts and strengths in organization or communication, but if I don't value those gifts, my self-esteem is going to be really low. I may personally value my gift to identify and relate emotionally to others. But if someone else I know really I married an engineer. If he really values deep logic, right, over emotional connectivity, I may start even to doubt the importance of that gift. Okay, and after years and years of marriage, that can wear you down to think that you don't have that gift anymore. Or if you do, who cares? It's really not that important. So it can be challenging to describe ourselves even to ourselves, but it's a good exercise to help us to recognize what our own unique gifts are. Okay, now sometimes we can recognize our gifts, and then we fail to act because we can't do it perfectly yet. We worry about failure or rejection because we want to do it perfectly. We want to have the iPad topped off to 100% before we start the talk. Okay? And sometimes we worry that we're not good enough because we value this call that God has given us to do. We really don't want to mess it up. I'm just going to let someone else say yes to that, Lord. I love, Sarah, that you say yes. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, I'm doing what God asked me to do, so that's on Him. Is your attitude, and it's just great. But as you begin to discover various strengths and weaknesses, it's important to recognize that we're not all on a perpetual self-improvement plan. And it can sometimes feel like that if we see where we're going, where we're someday striving towards perfection. Okay? Perfection is not the goal. It's the process that we should be focused on, not the outcome. We should be seeking a greater sense of peace in our life and a deeper understanding of our life as our relationship with God grows as his daughter, okay, he's not expecting perfection from us. The peace comes from the Lord, irrespective of the circumstances and the outcome. Because it comes from the acceptance that you are loved by God and you are doing what he's asked you to do. So again, if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, I did what God asked me to do. So I've got peace about it, right? So I want you to ask yourself, are you seeking peace through your day? Or are you simply trying to survive day to day? And I say both. I have both those days. Last week it was just trying to get through to the end of the week. But by being intentional about saying yes to the Lord, and by really trusting him with your heart, that will bring peace. A few days ago I found myself standing in the bathroom. We finished up so I have 3 kids at home, but this week we finished up 4 different sports teams. So we had my daughter doing basketball, my son doing soccer and volleyball, and another daughter doing soccer. So there was a lot of running around. And I was just in the bathroom and I just put my hands up. I was like, God, I surrender to you. All of it. I surrender it to you. And I just stood there. And it was amazing to be in the bathroom by myself, first of all, which those of you moms know that can be a rare thing from time to time. My kids, thankfully, are older. And I just stood in there in the bathroom by myself, like, I just surrender to you. All of it, whatever you want, it's yours. And there's such peace that comes from doing that and just throwing your arms up when no one's looking. Otherwise, a little bit of me would be like, ooh. No one's looking, just throw my arms up. I surrender to you, all of it. And I took a big, deep breath, a couple of it. And instead of being overwhelmed, I was overwhelmed by his peace and his presence. It's like I can just see him looking at me going like, why didn't you do this earlier? Why'd you wait all week to do this? Right. Father Jacques Philippe writes a lot about, are any of you guys familiar with Father Jacques Philippe? He's so, so good. Write his name down. He's a French priest, and he writes about the attitude of detachment in one of his books on spiritual peace. And he says that when we adopt an attitude of detachment, we're often not asked to give up everything. But it's in the surrender and the willingness to give it all up that brings peace. And so he writes, the proper attitude then is simply to be disposed to give everything up to God without panic and allow him to do things in his way. Have total confidence in him. God ultimately knows what's best for us because he knows us better than anyone else. He knows us better than we know ourselves. So to surrender is to give everything up completely to him. Too often we give God conditional surrenders. I'm so good at this. We file a complaint, we ask for help, we communicate our worry and our concern, but we don't quite give it all over to him with complete abandon. We share the burden. We make some requests. But then we keep that concern tucked away in a deep corner of our heart. But sometimes we visit at 2 or 3 a.m. When it's all dark and quiet. But real surrender means giving it all up without explanation, without constraint, without restrictions. It's the both arms up surrender to him. Surrender means we give up care for and responsibility for a solution. Okay? It becomes the Lord's problem, not ours. And that's hard for a lot of people to really give everything up. Now the Lord can still and does still use you as an instrument of his will, but only with your permission. So what burdens your heart right now? I want you to think for just a moment. What do you really, really want to surrender to him? And then I want to ask you, do you really want to surrender all that to him, or do you want to solve it with his help? Because sometimes we want to be the hero still. So do you want to be the hero, or do you want him to be the hero? Trust in your Father to heal that hurt or worry and give him the 2-arm, I surrender all of this to you and walk away from that. Now, many of us are familiar with this concept of perfectionism, and that's part of what keeps us from fully surrendering things to the Lord. For the perfectionist, your feelings of self-worth are contingent upon some sort of outcome. Perfectionists are binary. They have a dichotomous evaluation of a situation or of themselves. And it's either successful or not successful. For them, nothing less than perfection is considered a success. It's also, perfectionism is highly correlated with anxiety and depression, not surprisingly, right? We have unrealistic expectations of ourselves when we're a perfectionist, and that is really, really toxic to our self-worth and to our relationships, because frequently then we have unrealistic expectations of others, or zero expectations of others, because we know that they can't meet those, because they never do, so then we just give up. And perfectionism is a concept that's based on self-reliance, which tells us that if we can just be good enough, or work hard enough, or get less sleep, then we won't need anybody else or anything else, and we can just get it done. If you want something done right, do it yourself, right? On the surface, perfectionism seems like one of those faults that you could use in an interview question, right? So what's your greatest weakness? Oh, I can tend to be a perfectionist. I have very high standards for myself and high standards for my teammates. But a perfectionist has a very hard time working with teammates, right? That is not a good quality to bring about in an interview. If anybody's job shopping, do not go that route, because if the person interviewing knows anything about psychology, they're going to say, great, okay, well, thanks for coming. We'll get back to you. If you don't hear from us, though, good luck. Because perfectionism can undermine and erode your relationships with others. It can inhibit your ability to take risks and try new things. It can affect your acceptance of yourself and your ability to surrender to the will of God. The perfectionist strives not just to be the best version of themselves, but rather to be free completely from any sort of failure, from any sort of criticism, correction, direction from others. So that means you're really striving to be free from any opportunity to grow. And perfectionism can permeate everyday life. Decision-making, interactions with others, expectations of loved ones, daily life satisfaction, even your prayer life can be tainted or unhealthy due to your drive to excel in everything. And exhaustion is a constant companion for a perfectionist because there's always more to do. You will never be good enough. There's no joy in the activity, and there's no learning that takes place. So an undercurrent of self-reliant with a perfectionist extends beyond the healthy independence. It's not just a healthy independence. You're trying to be all and need no one. You're justice rather than mercy oriented, judgmental of others and yourself, and everything becomes personal. So there's this misnomer that as you get older, relationships get easier. So for the younger ones in the crowd, it's not true. Sometimes relationships get a lot harder as you get older, and I'm slowly starting to understand that. A lot of the difficulties in the relationships that I've experienced are not due to the imperfections in me or the imperfections in anybody else. It's due to me trying to control the outcome of a situation. Instead of accepting a childlike dependence on God, my Father, and saying, you're in control of this outcome, I'm only in charge of the interactions that I'm having and how I act in these interactions. Okay? You're responsible for a very small part of it. The cure for perfectionism then is not to stop caring or stop trying. It's to surrender more and to recognize what you are responsible for. And sometimes it's not until we've completely lost something that we're able to surrender it to the Lord. But how much better would it have been if we had just willingly surrendered it at the beginning? When we evaluate and consider our own conceptions of who we are in those day-to-day interactions, I want to encourage you all to be really forgiving of yourselves. Hopefully you're all doing an examination of conscience before bed. That's a practice that was suggested to me recently, and it's hard. Keep it short. You can go on and on and on right before bed about all the things. I went around with my spiritual director at one point, like, do you really think I should be doing one every night? Yes. But don't spend too much time with it. Like little corrections, little imperfections. It's great to look at that and to evaluate it. And then going to the sacrament of confession as often as you can. We heard this morning in Mass that for 12 hours they're going to be offering it on Friday. Where is that going to be? Which? Do you know which?
St. Martin's.
At St. Martin's. From 9 to 9 they'll be offering confession. That is such a beautiful way to see the places that you specifically need to invite the Lord in for deeper healing and for continual growth. Now, sometimes when we do this, go to confession, I mean, we can see like a pattern of inconsistencies in our behavior. Or sometimes when you just have a series of failures, you can see inconsistencies in yourself, and you can think, God, I used to think I was a kind person, but I'm always yelling at my kids, and I wasn't really nice to that guy at the school, and oh man, yeah, that was probably, maybe I'm just not that kind person. Maybe I'm more direct and honest than I am kind. Okay? So I change what I thought I was. I change that self-concept. And then I release myself of the obligation to be kind anymore. Don't do that. That is definitely not a way to grow through the recognition of an imperfection. When we recognize an imperfection or an inconsistency in our character, work to hone in on that inconsistency. Gosh, what are the times when I end up being really unkind to others? In our family, it's typically when it's dinner time. Well, why am I always so snippy with the kids at dinner time? Oh, I know, because I haven't eaten anything. Maybe if I get a little snack before I start making dinner, or maybe you switch things up. But don't just say, oh, I have a tendency to be unkind, so that must mean I'm not a kind person. Instead of taking that inconsistency in your character or that area of growth and really looking at it, sometimes we dismiss it. So I say, look at those inconsistencies in your growth with an openness. Look at it as an area for you to continue to grow and embrace it and say, okay, I'm going to go deeper with that. I'm going to take that to confession. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to get the grace to fix that, rather than just saying, I don't like that. So 1 James 1:12 says, blessed is the man who perseveres in temptation. For when he has been proved, he will receive the crown of life that he promised to those who love him. So the Lord does not require perfection from us. He's our Father and we're his daughter, and that means forever we're going to be growing as a child. Children grow so fast. We are forever children to him, constantly growing. He desires that we use the gifts that he gave us in a way that's going to bring him delight. A friend priest of mine told me once, he said, he told this whole group of us, God gave me a gift and he delights when I use it. And he continued to explain that God doesn't need any of us, right? He's the creator of the universe. But yet we exist. We were created because he wants us. He wants you in this world. He doesn't need you. but he wants you. So to live a life with integrity as God's daughter really means that you recognize your strengths and your weaknesses as part of who you were intentionally created by this God who wants you in this world. Fully accepting who you are will lead you to act more confidently in using those gifts and show consistency of character in different settings. Right? So if you're a kind person, that means you've got to strive to be a kind person in all settings, in all situations, not just when it's easy, but also when you're hungry or you're tired or you're kind of mad. James 1:2-5 says, "Be doers of the word, not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he's like a man who looks intently at his natural face in the mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away and at once forgets what he was like." So one of the most important things that we can do as a daughter of God the Father, as we strive to discover that identity and what that means, is to live a life of integrity. We all have notions of what it means to live a life of integrity. It means that we persevere, maybe our word is our bond, we hold fast to commitments, we aren't easily tempted or swayed by others. We don't really change our mind off when we're offered an easier or less rigorous path. We're like, no, we're going to do the hard thing. It means we do the right thing even when it's hard. But when we talk about integrity, we're also talking about being complete or whole, not just having sound moral judgment. So I challenge you to think about integrity and integrity of the self as not only referring to morality, but also referring to wholeness. Because that helps us to see that if we're living a life of integrity, we're coming into the whole person that we are. We're accepting our whole being, our entire identity, not segmenting ourselves or defining ourselves by one role or by another. And it means that we're the same person in every setting. One of the challenges in accepting our imperfect selves with humility is this idea of hypocrisy. We don't want to be prideful. We're aware of our faults sometimes, and we don't want to be hypocrites. So because we're imperfect and we don't want to be hypocrites, then we just don't use those gifts that we have. We can suffer from imposter syndrome sometimes, where we think that we're not good enough to teach others, or we're not good enough to accept certain roles that we know God is calling us to. When we start to use our gifts, but we lack trust or confidence, we can feel kind of like imposters. But think about, what would it have looked like if St. Paul had more fear than faith? I mean, he could be called one of the biggest imposters in the Bible. I mean, Jesus told him, "Get behind me, Satan," right? St. Peter got the strongest reprimand from Jesus in Mark 8:33. And yet, we're asked to be imitators of Christ. In Philippians, we hear, "Join with others in being imitators of me, brothers, and observe these who thus conduct themselves according to the model you have in us." St. Paul continues to say, "Keep on doing what you've learned and received and heard and seen in me, and then the God of peace will be with you." Both St. Peter and St. Paul recognized they didn't have to be doing everything perfectly in order to inspire others, in order to step up and do what they were supposed to be doing. Notice he tells them to do what they have seen in him. We've got models of good, holiness, holy men and women around us, and throughout Scripture, right? Not just the saints, in Scripture too. And they're probably good and holy people that you work with and live with every single day in your community. And sometimes when we just don't feel like we're good enough, you just got to fake it, ladies. Fake it till you make it, right? Faking is not wrong when you're acting in accordance with God's will for your life. When you know at your core that you're supposed to do something and you're unconfident at that, sometimes you just got to get up and do it anyway. And that's, again, how you strengthen that call, that purpose that God has given you. Do I always want to read a book to my daughter at night? Hopefully she's not watching this video at any point in time, but the answer is no. Usually I don't. I want to go in, I want to say prayers, I want to give her her blessing, I want to kiss her on the forehead, and then I want to walk from her bed to the door without hearing, "Mom!" Okay? No, I just want to be done. I'm tired. But I have to turn around and respond with her with love. I don't always want to stay up a little later with my husband either. Sorry, honey, if you're watching this, which he's also not going to. Okay? No, sometimes I don't want to. But if I turn to him night after night and say, "No, I don't want to spend any time with you, I'm going to bed," that's not good, right? Sometimes I do that. But sometimes you just got to fake it. You got to take a deep breath, put your big girl pants on, and say, "God is calling me to love in this moment right now." I don't always want to stay up to wait for my boys when they come home from late night soccer training. Again, they're probably not going to watch this, so it's okay. But I have to, or my husband has to. We're tired at 10 o'clock at night. We want to go to bed. We're getting old. Okay? But one of us needs to stay up most nights and make sure that they got home okay and check in eyeball to eyeball with them. Okay? And we can't do the, "God, finally you're home, I've been waiting up for you," and then storm off to bed, right? We got to put our smile on. We need to give the hug. We need to ask him how training was. Okay? We just got to fake it sometimes because that's what God's asking you to do in the moment. He's asking you to love, and you're not faking the love. Okay? Maybe you're faking the desire that you have. So just switch it around. Like, you desire to do God's will in that moment. Yes, I desire to do God's will in that moment. Do I desire to get up in the middle of the night with a baby? Not always. But I desire to do God's will in that moment, and so I'm going to do it. St. Teresa of Avila is my favorite saint, and she says, don't think too much. Do whatever opens you up to love. And she's talking about that in the spiritual life. It's from The Interior Castle. But it also applies in other aspects of your life too. Don't think too much. Just do what opens you up to love. Because love should be guiding us. When we let our hearts do the leading, we can easily fall into a pattern of justifying things. Justifying that less than loving behavior. When we let our bodies lead us, it's easy to fall into sin because our bodies are weak. St. Paul spoke of this frequently in his letters, Galatians, Romans. It isn't the success at the end that characterizes a good daughter. It's what inspires her life. It's what inspires her actions that gives the measure of her character as a good and loving daughter. So let's close this session in prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord, my Father, help me to be the best version of myself. Give me strength when I'm weary. Give me patience when I am worn. So I'm going to invite Sarah up now to come talk about her journey and her experience.